Hi, everybody. This is Ken Vandermark, and it's Monday night, which means it's the Option Series. We have a very, very special guest tonight, Hamid Drake, world-renowned musician, drummer, extraordinary figure beyond music. And it's very exciting to actually have you here. Thanks for joining us, Hamid. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you, Ken. It's great to be here with you, brother. As always, it's always wonderful to be with you, man. No matter what the situation and circumstances are, and we've had many of them. So
we've had a few. Maybe we'll discuss some of those later in the show. But I want to know, Hamid.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this for these folks, man. Wonderful artists.
Yeah, no, it's been an exciting thing to be involved in, especially when it's harder to get out and play shows, to actually see friends and musicians I don't know yet, talk to them about their work like this. And for a lot of people who are fans of yours, this is a great opportunity for them to get another viewpoint into your work, And so if people have questions, please post them in the chat on the YouTube chat room, whatever, and we'll try to get to some of those as the show progresses. Hamid came back by my place on Friday, and we're both been vaccinated for many, many weeks now. And it was really, I didn't realize it until you came by the house, but I haven't seen you for almost a year and a half.
Yeah, it's been about that, man. Wow.
And it was just so powerful just to say, here you are, and to face each other and just
and to see
the same space, So it felt like a real turning point for me personally in this progress going forward to try to move past the pandemic and get the music happening again. And so for me, a real pivotal day in 2021 for me. So it was great to share that with you. I mean,
for me too, to see you and just I felt like we picked up where we left off, kind of.
That's why I couldn't believe it was a year and a half. It was kind of funny. It was like, wait a minute, it's been. Huh? So Hamid recorded a bunch of solo music for us, and we're going to start off with the first piece. We'll play them in the order that they were recorded. There's a really great flow to it. It almost feels like a long improvisation or chapters in a longer piece. The first one features just work on cymbals. And let's take a look at that, and then we'll come back and talk to Hamid about what he's been up to and what he thinks about. Thanks, Hamid.
Thank you, brother.
Hi, everyone. If you just tuned in, that was Hamid Drake playing one of several solo pieces that he recorded just on Friday. Beautiful work on the cymbals. I love the way you organized the pieces and focused on different parts of the drum set. It's like a mix of instruments in some ways. Yes. And why? Just out of curiosity, why did you approach it that way? Like kind of breaking the kit down into components.
Well, it's actually it's I think, well, for starters, I think the modern day drum set is probably that being an extension of the contraption. It's one of the most, I know this sounds biased, of course, but I think it's one of the most amazing instruments, that we have for several reasons. One is, like you said, the drum set is kind of like a combination of many different instruments, and it contains many of the elements. I mean, there's metal, there's wood, there's I mean, in the beginning, of course, the skins were made out of animal, like calf skins, but the cymbals also have a very special quality too, and there's no particular cymbal that sounds like another cymbal. They all sound kind of differently. Even the ones that aren't necessarily hammered anymore, but they're made on the machines. But with the hammered ones, which is what I have, they can be made to your specific sort of design and what you're kind of looking for tonally. But I'm still mystified by, the drum set and also by some of the early masters, who had these contraptions, and they would have these really huge bass drums and maybe a kettle drum or timpani on the side here, and maybe Chinese woodblocks or Chinese toms. No hi-hat at the time because it hadn't been invented yet. They had the sock cymbal, which was way down by the foot pedal of the bass drum. The sock is down there, and over the years, I've been really getting into like these, the tonal quality of the overtones, of the cymbals, and like how you can work with that, and also you can still get some kind of melodious things going too.
Definitely.
That was kind of like just a tribute in a way to the early development of the modern day drum kit, and the development of how the cymbals, changed over time, and also how you can, because there's so many instruments in one, but at the same time you can be very minimal too, with the drum kit. There's many percussionists today, many masters today who are masters of being minimalists also on this instrument, which is a combination of several different instruments. And so I think, I wanted to start with that first before bringing the feet, stuff like that in.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's kind of, we were talking before the show started about, I'm so used to when I hear you play, most often I'm playing with you.
Yes.
It's a rare occasion when I get to see you play with other musicians. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen because our paths don't cross enough on the road and whatnot. But I'm very thankful that we get to play as much as we even can, So I'm used to like just dealing with the music, but to sit there and, so-called video these performances and just be close and watch from these angles that I'm not usually being able to view you. It was really extraordinary, and the touch on the cymbals and the feel that comes across. It was I felt very privileged just to be there with you, to be honest, not just to flatter you, but in all honesty, it really was a unique situation. We've known each other for a long time, but it was like I don't actually really ever get to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting to say that too.
And if I'm in the audience, I'm in the audience. I'm not next to you like that.
I feel the same. I'm so used to just us playing together. So I was experiencing a little bit of nervousness, actually, just playing, in front of you, like watching.
Yeah, like be glaring down. Yeah, right.
Okay,
Well,
Ken's gonna see what's really going on here now. Not so much.
well, the second piece features more of the kit, and there's a couple things about that I wanted to talk about. It was you focused on cowbells, and you put like a blanket over the drums to have like a really special, not muffled, but different kind of sound on the kit. And there's two questions about that. The first one is it really reminded me of Ed Blackwell's. I mean, not in a derivative way, but just this polyrhythmic use of the cowbell. And he was such a master with cowbell in the recordings that I know, especially with Don Cherry. And I was just wondering if Blackwell's work has a kind of significance for you or had a special kind of impact on you as a player.
Oh, absolutely. And he was amazing drummer, amazing, human being, very kind and friendly man also, I got to spend a little time with him. Yes, I think he was probably the first drummer that I, listened to that I could hear in a certain way, especially with the bells, the distinct, like sort of African, influence. I mean, you hear that in all the great masters. I mean, even from Baby Dodds on and Art Blakey, all of that stuff. But there's something about the way that Blackwell approached it, and there was a particular pattern that he played a lot. The kind of 12/8 pattern. He kind of went into that a lot, but developed on it, and he was kind of like my guide into like incorporating like the cowbell into the drum kit. Even though, like I was saying earlier, with some of the early masters, they did that too, but he did it in a sort of modern, way, especially with Don Cherry and with some of the other folks he played with too, but particularly in his solo work, the bell oftentimes was prominent. The cloth, that's something that, it kind of changes the tonal quality of the drums.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've seen many great drummers, cover their drums in some way or another. Paul Ovens for one.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily use a big cloth, but sometimes just a towel or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and it really changes the whole tonal quality of the drums, and so it causes you to think, in a different way. And I think whenever you put an object, on top of your instrument, the drum set, it's going to change the quality of the sound of the kit.
Mm-hmm.
But also it causes you to, think about sonics a little differently also.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's also from, just studying African music and particularly music from Ghana, like the Awe drumming and stuff like that. The bell, the person that plays the bell is usually the leader of the drum ensemble, because they're playing a pattern, and everything is based around that pattern. They change they might change the tempo, so everyone has to listen to them. And depending upon like if they're playing soft or louder, that changes the whole, modality of the piece. And just as one simple instrument, plays a great role. And also in like, let's say Afro-Cuban music also, where playing the bell on the clave, it kind of pulls all the other segments of, the drumming and the music together. So if like, for instance, if let's say in the Afro-Cuban situation, if maybe a saxophone player or a trumpet player or someone like that, let's say gets out of time or plays a note that they shouldn't play, it's going to bring attention, but it's not as much attention as if the person who's playing the clave on the bell gets off.
Oh yeah, the whole thing.
Steady, all the time, which is a kind of like a curse and a blessing in a way, especially for if you're a drummer who wants to move in other modalities of music, and if you've been so attuned to the clave, it can be hard to get away from that in your development with other forms of music.
Mm-hmm.
That's how prominent, that kind of thing is. It gets all into your system and everything.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Blackwell using those patterns that were influenced from Ghana, and what he was so fluid with it.
Very fluid.
It was so mobile, and it could blend into something, move completely away from it, and then bring it back or layer on top of it. I mean, his layering of melodic statements on the drums. Some of the most amazing music I've ever experienced, ever, not in person. I mean, let's take a listen to the piece, because you have that same capability. Let's take a listen to this what the focuses more on the cowbells, and then come back, and I'd like to talk with you more about this, but also about your experiences with Don Cherry, who is definitely a hero of mine, just to get your insight, because you work with him so much. You're listening to the Option Show, Option Talks program. Tonight's guest is Hamid Drake. If you didn't already know that, you do now. And we're going to listen to a little bit more solo music from Hamid Drake. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll be back with some more conversation just after this piece. Yeah, I mean, I love the moment when the lower tom falls over, and you don't even miss a beat. It's like, well, there you go.
Yeah,
Well, there you go.
yeah, right. That's a little humor to everything too, you know.
Yeah, I actually laughed a bit, and it's on the mic.
Right.
Yeah, I love the you're such a narrative improviser. You know, every piece, not just on the things that you recorded on Friday, but playing with you and hearing you, it's like when you have a solo, or even when you're playing in an ensemble situation, it's like you're always telling something. There's always a form, you know, and that one piece, even with the drum drop into the ground, it's like, okay, we're moving over here now, and there's the ideas just keep flowing, and the ending, the
Yeah.
coda, like, is a summation. It's like listening to you while I was filming. I was like, man, what's he gonna, you know, how's he gonna get out of this? Because there's so many ideas coming. How's he gonna shape? You know what I mean? It's not just endless idea. It's got a shape that gives it energy. You know, it's really, really beautiful to hear it as a listener that close and watch you play. It's so great. Before we went to that, I wanted to. We have a bunch of questions from people in the audience. We're going to try to get to those, but I really want to get to hear from you a little bit about your work with Don Cherry. Right now, there's a bunch of activity connected to Don Cherry and Moki Cherry's history. A book has just been published by Blank Forms called Organic Music Societies. It really looks to be an amazing document. I just got a copy of that, and they're having an exhibition, I think, somewhere in the New York area. And in the early autumn, at Corbett versus Dempsey, they're going to do an exhibit of Moki Cherry's tapestries and a bunch of Moki's work. So it's like a kind of like a moment where, you know, people are looking at Don Cherry, as they should, because he's such a tremendous creative force in the history of culture, you know, music and beyond. And you worked with him. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience, his impact on you, how he maybe helped open up your perspective or shift it around. I mean, I just would like to be a fly on the wall right now and listen.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for mentioning that book. Also, I wasn't aware of that. You know,
I'll get you a copy of it.
Wow, man, that's really fantastic. And just the name itself, Organic, you know, Music Society. It kind of lets you know the ground, kind of like what that Don was coming from, because he viewed things from a state of wholeness, you know. Yeah, I have to say that he was one of the most amazing people, you know, that had the opportunity to meet, to be around, and to play with, you know, and to, you know, take many trips with him, many different conversations. Going back to the solo work, because Don would always say something about style, you know, and what he said about style kind of set me free, and it kind of set me into, it helped me go into a direction that I am now, particularly with soloing. And he would always say that style can become the death of creativity. If you think that your style is better than someone else's style, you know. So he would always say, try and find your style, your own voice, you know, but don't compare it to anyone else's voice. You can be influenced by other voices, but don't go into the mind frame where you think that your particular voice or style is greater than this other person's. And for me, that was very freeing, you know, because it did several things. One, it allowed me to just simply accept myself, you know, and the direction that I wanted to go in. And I didn't feel like I had to compare it, you know, with anyone else's. I first met Don, it was in 1978, actually. I was playing with a group called the Mandingo Griot Society. It featured a core player from the Gambia, Foday Musa Suso, percussionist Adam Rudolph, and a bass player, Joe Thomas, and myself. Adam and Suso had met each other when Adam was in Ghana, studying at the University of Accra, Ghanaian percussion. Suso, Foday Musa Suso, was brought to Ghana from Gambia because at that time at the university they were bringing young master musicians from different parts of Africa to come there and teach. And for the Kora, Suso had been selected. So when they came back to the States together because Musa wanted to start a group. And so when Adam was in Ghana, he wrote me about it, and I said, "Yeah, man, let's do it." And they arrived in Chicago September 7th, 1977.
Yeah, good memory, man.
September 8th, I met Suso. September 9th, Adam was living in Hyde Park. That's where I met Suso. September 9th, we started looking for a bass player,
Wow.
and found this amazing bassist, electric bass player, Joe Thomas, to be the bass player. And from that point on, we started doing concerts around Chicago, different clubs. And we had be doing a concert place. We would play there like every other Thursday. It was called the Wise Fools. And one of those nights, we were approached by this gentleman by the name of Bruce Kaplan, and he introduced himself as the owner of Flying Fish Records, and and he said that he would like to record us, and we were pretty hardy at that time too, because we thought we really had something special, So we said, yeah, okay, that's cool, but only if we could add someone to the group who's very well known and that's into world music. And he said, sure. So we said we would like to bring Don Cherry in as a special guest.
Oh.
And he said, oh, okay, no problem.
Wow.
Where's Don living? We said, well, he's living in Sweden now, so you have to fly him in and pay him really good, and put him up, And he said, no problem. And we were like, really?
Wow.
Because we thought he would just say, no, I can't do that, fellas, But he did. And Don arrived in Chicago, and we met, and we started rehearsing. We did the rehearsals and the recording at Kurt Tom Studios. It was owned by Curtis Mayfield.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah.
And that was really our first recording, and that was my very first recording, also. Very first time, being on a
first recording was with Don Cherry.
Yeah.
What do you do next?
Right.
Man.
I didn't think much of it at the time, but as years passed, I'm like, wow, really? And and Don, man, he was so friendly and so giving, and so like unassuming. He wasn't like on any kind of pedestal or anything like that, but he was really happy to be with us. By that time he'd already traveled to West Africa a few times. He had traveled to North Africa also. And also by that time, he had been studying and playing the dusunguni, which is from Mali, the hunter's harp. And he was introduced to that instrument by a very special person and very special friend of his, also, Christer Botin, from Sweden, excellent bass clarinet player and stuff too. And so he introduced Don to the dusunguni, the hunter's harp. And Don really fell in love, with that instrument. So he already had like somewhat of a knowledge of the music from Mali or the whole Mandingo region, even though Suso was from Gambia, but still it was that music coming from Sunjata Keita, the Mali Empire, and so forth, the music of the griots. And so after we did the recording, Don, he said, hey, Hamid, he said, man, I had my daughters were very young at the time. Ananda was almost 2. Shanti was 6 months. And he said, I would like you to come to Sweden, with your family, and to stay with us, for a little while. Wow. He said, we have a music room, and, a lot of musicians come through. We can play some music, and it's out in the countryside in southern Sweden. And so he invited Adam Rudolph, myself, and my wife at the time, and our 2 girls, So my mother, She's so sweet, man. She loaned us the money to fly on the Icelandic Air from Chicago to Reykjavik, then from Reykjavik to Luxembourg. Then we took a train from Luxembourg to Munich, then from Munich to Copenhagen. And then Don picked us up in Copenhagen, and we took a boat over to Malmo.
Wow,
And
that's a journey, man.
Adam had his congas. He had two congas with him. I had my cymbals. We had like 3 suitcases just for stuff for Anand and Shanti, you know, diapers, Pampers, and all that kind of stuff, you know. And so a very interesting happened. Don met us in Copenhagen, and we took a boat over to Malmo, and we had to go through customs, you know, in Malmo at that time. And so they wanted to know how long we were going to stay, who our sponsor was, how much money we had, if we had enough money to get a ticket to go back, if we had a return ticket. We didn't have a return ticket because we didn't know how long we were going to stay. But our sponsor was here, you know, Don Cherry. So interesting thing happened, just to show you something about the magic of Don, man. He was a, he since he was married to Moki, he had like a residency card for Sweden, but it had expired, and he didn't know it.
Oh no.
Yeah. And but they knew who he was. You know, the customs folks, they knew who he was, and they said, okay, since you who you are, you know, you're responsible for these folks, and so they let us go. You know, because of
Wow.
that, and we all piled into his car somehow. And we drove from Malmo to Skåne, to Toggarps, and we were all vegetarians at the time. My daughters had never had meat in their life, you know. And we get to their place, beautiful old Swedish schoolhouse that they had turned into their living space. Moki comes out and she says she's very happy to see us, and she made one of her specialties, which is Swedish meatballs, you know. And so she was so happy, man. And so we looked at each other and we said, wow, that sounds great. You know?
Oh
And
wow.
so we had a great dinner, no ill effects or anything, you know. And that was probably, that was the next step of the, you know, the adventure, you know, with Don, because we were on like his home turf, you know. And we would get together every day and play, you know, in the music room. You know, Nana was there, Eagle Eye was there, and Moki, which I wanted to say earlier too, when you were speaking, it's very difficult for me now to speak about Don without also speaking about Moki, because she, especially in his later music, like the period, you know, after Gato and Pharoah Sanders and Ornette and all of that stuff, she influenced him musically to a great extent because of the nature of her tapestries, you know, and that kind of guided his kind of like philosophical view about the music, you know, because they both got involved in Buddhism together, for instance, particularly Tibetan Buddhism. They had great teachers together, and Moki was doing a lot of tapestries that kind of reflected that, and so I would have to say, in many ways, she was like his guide, you know, in those particular regions, and it really influenced his musical perspective a lot, also. And with her tapestries, you could see the sound, you could feel the sound coming from those colors, you know, that she was doing. And Don was very much affected by that, and we were also, because their home was just filled with her amazing tapestries, you know. And so after our time in Sweden, we were there for about 6 months, and then we went to Paris to do a concert with Charlie Hayden. And also Trilak Gurtu, the great percussionist from India, he joined us in Sweden also. He was there for quite some time, and we were rehearsing a lot with him, playing a lot. So we had this group with Charlie Hayden, Don, myself, Adam Rudolph, Trilak Gurtu, a musician from Montpellier in France, but he was living in Sweden also. His name was Dudu Gorian, alto saxophone player. Him and Don were great friends. They would get together every day and play. And Dudu, he joined us on that. Then there was also like this guy who's kind of like a magician that was on stage with us, French guy, but his name was Abdul, you know. And then we had a special guest in the second half of the concert, another great tabla player from India. His name was Ustad Latif Khan. And Don did a duet recording with him. I can't remember the name of the record, but it's just Latif Khan and Don Cherry. Don's playing trumpet, organ, and Dusangoni on it. And so, man, you know, that was like kind of like the first concert, you know, playing with Don.
Wow.
Then from there, everything just kind of organically happened. He would call me to do a lot of things. And I think the first tour that I did with Don, that was a real tour. It was a group that Don had with myself and the Native American indigenous saxophone player, Jim Pepper, you know, and a Swedish bass player, Siggy Krantz, who's I hear is a really wonderful engineer now, and a guitar player from Italy. Now his name is Jayadeva, Deva, but his name at the time was Gian Piero Pomaggiore. And so we toured all over Europe, you know, this group. And we're playing a lot of Jim Pepper's music, you know, and Jim took a lot of indigenous songs and developed them into a jazz format, and a lot of Don's music and, you know, Ornette's music and some Thelonious Monk things. Then after we finished the tour in Europe, we, Don, Jim, myself, and Don's cousin, Ricky Cherry, he joined us because our U.S. State Department tour had to be all musicians from the United States. Wow. So called Ricky as a piano player. And at first it was going to be the States, U.S. State Department tour, but the U.S. State Department had some hesitation about it. They weren't sure they wanted to do it, you know, jazz and all of that, you know. And so Don was very close to this guy named Martin Messonnier, who was kind of like Don's agent in a way in France. Later on, he was one of the first people that kind of got MTV going in France, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so he said, Don, listen, he said, I'll talk to the French State Department, see if they want to do it. And the French State Department said, yes, you know, Don Cherry, yeah, you know, especially if he plays in some of the Francophone countries. With the Americans, we were going to only play in the English-speaking countries with the U.S. State Department. But after the U.S. State Department found out that the French State Department was going to get involved, they agreed to do it, you know. So we played in French-speaking places and in the English-speaking places. And that was amazing. I mean, and yeah, so then things just kept happening, kept playing with Don a lot. I did his last tour with him also right before he passed away with Mark Elias and Carlos Ward, you know, and after Ed Blackwell died, passed away, Don asked me to join that particular group he had with Blackwell called New Now, you know, and I felt really weird about it at first because I was like, wow, Blackwell was the drummer in this group. And so Don, he said, Hamid, you know, listen, he said, you're not replacing Blackwell. He said, that was another group with Blackwell.
Yeah.
This is the group with you. We're going to keep the same name, but this is a group with you. So don't feel bad, you know. He said, plus, you know, Blackwell, you know, was your friend. I know you respected him. He respected you. So just relax on that, you know, because I thought I had to fill Blackwell's shoes, you know.
Right. And how could you do that?
How could I do that? Because it was, all the other instrumentation was the same. Bob Stewart on tuba, Carlos Ward, you know, on flute and alto, and Don and myself. And yeah, so he, Don guided me a lot in a lot of different ways. He's the one that kind of helped me with the whole, him and Fred Anderson, with the whole kind of cosmological view about music, you know, that about the whole vibration, you know, of sound and how it has, you know, an effect upon you. And I think perhaps from Albert Eiler also, Don got the whole concept that music is a healing force, you know, in the universe, you know. And so it was man, it's like, I was like, sometimes it was so overwhelming, I didn't even really want to think about it because it's like I was playing with this man who had worked with Albert Eiler, who had worked with Ornette, did such monumental things with Ornette, who had worked with, John Coltrane, who, but at the same time, he had done so many of his own things and he had his own voice. And the other thing about Don, too, is that I would say he taught me about the masculine and feminine aspects of music and sound. So even like the stuff with the bells, and then with the drum stuff with the bells, to me that's like this whole kind of yin and yang thing happening. It's masculine and feminine. And man, I mean, there was this one experience, like the first stage experience with Don, very powerful. Just in how such a patient person he was too with playing music. He was very non-judgmental, And I remember we were playing this one song, and the kind of coda that we were going to go out on with the song was an Indian T-high, which is something you repeat 3 times. And I was playing that Blackwell rhythm, goom, goom, rak-ga-ga-chka, goom, goom, And so then Don was going to introduce the T-high, tatita, tatita, the digga-da-tune, the digga-da-tune, the digga-da-tune, 3 times, okay? So, we're playing. I'm like, man, I'm like so happy to be up there. I'm in Spaceville, my eyes are closed and everything. So I hear him recite it, but I had lost track of the number of times, So the whole group stopped except me, Everybody stopped, but I was still playing. So Don brought the group back in again. And so by that time, I woke up, So he did it again, and we all ended together. Then when we were backstage after the concert, he said to me, he said, "Yeah, Hamid," he said, "I see you like to go into trance when you play." He said, "That's cool." He said, "But it's good to be awake also." And that was it, He didn't say like, "Oh man, you blew it, you messed up," nothing like that.
Yeah.
And then he laughed,
Yeah. Well, that's like such a beautiful way to recover too. It's like, okay, we just do it again. Like,
right.
It's that flow, like connected to the idea of being organic and everything. I mean, that's so beautiful.
And the other thing,
go ahead.
This other thing about Don too is that he had such a great respect, for like all music, and he never lost his respect for those that he considered to be his teachers also, like Ornette, he felt was one of his teachers, Thelonious Monk, Coltrane, Alice Coltrane, and he always held them, very high, because he was always appreciative of the what he felt he had received from them. And he also held the people that he played with, he held them in high esteem, also. I mean, he, from Han Benning to Ben Besher to, European musicians, as well as American musicians, as well as African musicians too, like Johnny Diani and Dudu Pakwana and people like that, and all the European artists that he worked with. I never got the sense that he felt like one group was better than the other. It was like he felt that everybody had something to offer and contribute. So he was very multicultural, but in a real way, in a very real way, like real appreciative of what the different people from the different cultures could bring to the music as a whole,
And also that like the groups, it was like so much about the individuals, like, okay, their own background, where they came from.
Yes.
But very often it was a mix, like all the groups you just talked about that you were in. Were a mix of people from different places, different backgrounds.
That's
and
right.
He was a genius at pulling these different backgrounds and personalities together into a group that really had its own synergy.
That's right. That's right.
So like when you came in, like you said, and Ed Blackwell had passed away, and you joined New Now, it wasn't to replace Blackwell. It was to be you in that configuration. You know what I mean?
You're right, and that's true, and that's how Don felt about. Because I think also when he asked us to go to Sweden with him, it was because he, he really sincerely felt that, each person had something, to offer. You're right, and to give, and when he did that, I was thinking like, man, because he was saying, I remember once we had dinner together, and he was saying, yeah, I mean, you should play with this person, you should play with that person, you should play with McCoy Tyner, you should play with Dollar Brand, all that kind of stuff, and I'm thinking like, whoa, Plus, I was so young too, and it's like I was like thinking, how could I do that? But at the same time, I was sitting with Don Cherry,
right,
who's just as great,
Yeah.
But even in a short span of time, this like kind of relationship had formed where you felt like he was your friend, so you would kind of forget about his greatness in a way sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
And he was just, he had, his difficulties, life difficulties, but he tried to work with it, and I know everybody has a lot of different stories, but there was one thing that never left him, I feel, and that was just his essential, kindness, and his love for the music and like ever expanding upon it,
Mm-hmm.
and teaching. He was a great teacher, and he would kind of help you find your own voice, in his own kind of subtle ways,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, he would always invite people to the group that he felt they had something to say or something that he admired, and you might not even know what that is,
Yeah,
but
he was hearing it somehow.
hearing it, yeah, he was hearing it.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to a little bit more of your music. This is a third solo focusing on the drum set, and this is like full-fledged drumming on the kit. Yeah.
Before we do that, I'd like to tell one more story.
Oh,
too,
yeah,
that
of course.
I
Yeah,
feel
sure.
very important, because Peter Brotzman was a friend of Don's, also very much into Don's music. And Peter told me a really interesting story that I didn't know, because a lot of times, when Don would travel through Europe, he traveled with his family. They had like a Volkswagen bus, and they would travel to all these different places. He always traveled with the family, do these gigs. And Peter told me that occasionally they would always come to Wuppertal, and they would stay at Peter's place, when Peter was married to Krista and stuff at the time. And Peter told me that Don was going to Paris to do a gig, and he invited Peter to come along, and to be in the group. And Peter told me that was a particularly hard time for him because nobody was really accepting him, But he said it was after he did that concert with Don, and Don had kind of given like the wink, kind of. He said, Peter told me then things really started to open up for him more because, Don Cherry had given Peter this like kind of like the okay, not saying anything to anybody, but just saying, hey man, come on, let's come and play, be on the stage with me, blah 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 blah. And people saw that, Peter told me folks, started to think differently about him after that.
Yeah.
So I think Don in his own kind of special way maybe knew that also, and like he says, yeah, Peter, you're my brother. Come on, man, let's do this. And then another world kind of opened for Peter.
Yeah. That's really beautiful to hear. I mean, what more acknowledgement has more meaning than to play with someone you admire?
Yes.
And to feel that bond and that support. I mean, that's incredible. That's a really incredible. And then look at what Peter has done.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like opening up all these possibilities. It's such a generous act. Really beautiful. Yeah. So I guess what I was going to say very quickly in preface to this, because unfortunately there's more music to hear and there's more to talk about, and there's this short clock. But part of this particular solo piece references some very essential Max Roach solo music. So I'd just like to play it. Maybe we could talk briefly about that. There's like a bunch of questions from people, and I don't know how we're going to get to everything, but some discussion of, I think Max Roach is pretty significant in terms of just what we were talking about on Friday. So we'll try to do what we can do, and that's all we can do. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. Talks music with Hamid Drake tonight, and here's some more solo music from Hamid Drake. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Hamid. We're still working out the tech. We've been doing it every week for months, and yeah, I'm still working on the tech. Thanks to Ralph Loza and ESS for doing the work tonight behind the scenes, and to Experimental Sound Studio for doing the ongoing quarantine concerts. It's been an amazing gift to the music world during this really trying period. Yeah, we were talking at the time when you played that piece on Friday, the reference to the Max Roach classic solo piece. And I just wanted, I mean, your knowledge of jazz history, the history of jazz drums, percussion from around the world, and we're going to hear another piece of yours in just a moment because we're unfortunately running out of time. But I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about the significance of Max Roach being one of the people that was so essential to taking the idea of the drum solo and making it something completely unique outside of the context of a drum solo within a group performance.
That's a good question, Ken, and it's really phenomenal in a way, you know, because let me start by saying this. To me, it's always interesting it's been interesting. Normally, in a traditional setting, you know, the drummer's playing, piano player playing, sax player, trumpet player, guitar player, whatever. You know, they take a solo. You know, drummer's always supporting. Even if the bass player takes a solo, drummer's usually still playing. Drummer takes a solo, everybody stops. You know. You know.
Good point.
Yeah. So. I don't know if this is true or not, but I would imagine now, since you're kind of all alone, you know, and there's no like supports in a way, I feel drummers probably had to come up with some kind of unique, you know, things, you know, some unique ideas because it's just them, you know. But the thing about Max Roach is so beautiful because he made the kind of helped the drum set become this beautiful orchestral solo, you know, instrument, you know, and outside of the tradition that he initially came from, where the bass drum was always on the four, that boom, 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 hi-hat on the 2 and 4, you know, and like doing your solo based around that, which is phenomenal too. You know, because all the great drummers who did that, you know, none of them really sounded the same. You know, they all had their unique way of doing it. I feel that also Max Roach was probably very much influenced by Papa Joe Jones, you know, because he definitely, Papa Joe definitely made an art out of soloing on the drum kit, you know. Perhaps he was a little bit more of a showman than Max, you know, in many respects, you know, because he always played, he had that big smile and just, you know, just looking straight ahead. You know, Max was, not to say that Papa Joe wasn't serious, you know, he was. But Max was a very, you know, serious, you know, sort of person, you know. And I think what he gave to the kit was a very sort of, and I hope I don't, you know, it's not offensive what I'm going to say, but I think he gave a very, you know, kind of pinpointed, you know, intellectualism kind of, you know, to the art of soloing, a certain type of tight preciseness also, you know, and just doing that thing in 3 that he does, that booch, 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 booch. I used to just practice that, try and solo off of that, and try and do a combination of things without losing that booch, booch. And in the beginning, it was very difficult, you know? And so an appreciation for Max Roach started to rise even more and more and more because he was able to do that booch, booch, and do all this counter stuff too, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he, you know, I think Max was a Juilliard graduate, right? You know? And so he had a very sort of precision, sharp way of approaching this, and also him being a composer himself too. You know, so I think he thought about drum solos in a very compositional sort of way too. It seemed like. You this particular thing that I just did, it was definitely something about Max Roach, but also it was kind of, to me, it was kind of like a Max Roach meeting Zigaboo, a Max Roach meeting Bernard Purdy, a Max Roach, maybe meeting, someone like Philly Joe, and things like that, because with that boom, boom, you can do a lot of different things in there, but definitely I was feeling like Zigaboo and like Bernard Purdy, in there too, and like the great jazz R&B drummers too, because Bernard Purdy kind of falls into both categories. He's a great jazz drummer, but he backed, so many people, other people also. He was doing that kind of jazz, R&B thing with King Curtis. He was Aretha Franklin's drummer, and he done so many things. I remember, I think I was maybe 12 years old. He came out with a solo 45. It's called Funky Donkey Time. A lot of people might not remember this, or maybe not familiar with it, but it was like his piece, Funky Donkey Time, and he was doing that solid funk, and then I started tracing his history of, the other stuff he did with other people. But I only met Max Roach one time, and I was playing a concert in Chicago. It was at the Asian American Jazz Festival. It was a trio. I was playing with Fred Anderson. I think the other saxophonist was Francis Wong from San Francisco. And on that particular concert, and Max was there also. He was there with a group that he had called the Beijing Trio, which featured a piano and the Chinese violin, the erhu. So we were playing, and I just brought like a djembe, my hi-hat, snare drum, and cymbal, and because we didn't have really long to play, and I wanted to do something kind of minimal. And so I'm playing, and then I turn around behind me to my left, there's a curtain, and the curtain was slightly open, okay? And I turn around, and it was Max Roach.
I don't mind the behind the curtain. You know what's behind the curtain.
And he was looking, man. And then I'm like, oh, to myself, I'm like, oh, God. But, you have to keep playing. You have to keep playing. And the next day, Max was on a panel with Fred Anderson. And I was a young drummer at the time, and Max, he asked Fred, he said, hey, Fred, who's that young drummer that was playing with you? And Fred started laughing, that Fred laugh, that laugh he had. He said, oh, man, that was Hamid. And Max said, I really liked what he was doing, And when Fred told me that, it was like, oh, man, it's like, I mean, what can you say,
Yeah, that's so much validation. That's so much energy.
What can you say? So Max was definitely a great inspiration for me. When I first started playing in the group with Fred Anderson, with George Lewis and Douglas Stewart and Billy Brimfield and Saji Adebayo and Felix Blackman, we would rehearse every week, and Fred would like cook food, we rehearse, we talk, and we listen to music together. And we were listening to a lot of things that Max, was doing also. Fred was a big Bird, Charlie Parker fan. So listened to a lot of the Charlie Parker stuff with Max. And so Max had a really big influence on me because we weren't playing like Bird and those guys, but he kind of gave me an idea of how to approach the kit in a very improvisational sense, but with time, also, and I think even prior to Blackwell, Max I got this sort of melodic sense of the drums from him, and then Blackwell gave me another melodic sense from the drums. But Max was like a scholar, and I respected him for that, and also his activism. He was a political activist, and so and he was a very he's very serious about the instrument, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very serious. And my own impression is that I felt that he felt, um, you know, the drum set was an integral part of the ensemble. It just wasn't like this timekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
Its role was just as important as the piano player, the bass player, or the saxophone player, or the trumpet player. You know, just not just as a timekeeper, but melodically important also. You know, changing the shape of the music. You know, and changing the direction of the music. You know, not just a follower. You know, an active, creative, you know, artist that's just as responsible for the shape, tonality, color, you know, of the music as it's flowing as the other musicians. And I think he showed people that because of the time, I think he also taught us that drummers are composers just as well as any other instrumentalist, and that we're composing as we play, just as all of the other artists, you know, that are on stage are composing too as they play, you know, and that, and I think he brought the kid up to another sort of prominent, you know, level, along with all the other great drummers too, you know, he really brought it up to another prominent level. I think kind of like in the way in which like Tony Williams did in the jazz world, but also someone like I feel that Keith Moon and Mitch Mitchell in the rock world, you know, they brought the drums up to another prominent level. I mean, Mitch Mitchell, he had that whole jazz thing going on, playing in this really intense rock context with Jimi Hendrix, you know, and all of the stuff Keith Moon did with Who, you know, and so, and there's so many other drummers too that have done that, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, so Max, he, I think he was very much responsible. No, of course, I mean Elvin too. We can't, of course, Elvin.
Yeah, there's a few people in that list.
A few people, but Max was very different, you know, too, because he, I think he still was like a traditionalist, you know. He always was involved in what we call the traditional swing, you know, in a way. You know, and I'm not saying swing is just that's one form of swing, you know, but he was very much always involved in that kind of traditional swing, you know, in a way. But he was an educator too, you know. So.
Yeah. Well, when you think just the fact that early in his career he was playing with Charlie Parker, and later in his career he was playing with Anthony Braxton and Cecil Taylor, and all the things in between, and how who he is as Max Roach in all those contexts, and totally evolving, changing, adapting. I mean, it's awe-inspiring. I mean,
and with the, I think he did something with art ensemble too, right? Didn't he do something with the art ensemble? No, that was Cecil Taylor. I'm sorry. Yeah, Cecil did something with the art ensemble.
Yeah, so there's like all this cross-pollination in histories and time as well as location. So yeah, it's super important. I'd really like to play the other pieces, and I want to apologize to people who've been sending really great questions in.
Sorry,
conversation. No, man, this is what I love. This is oral history at its best, you know. And what I'll just throw it out there. Hopefully, we could do a follow-up show.
I would love to.
And just hand it over to the audience and let maybe have some more music, but let folks remember these questions so we can get to them, because we're kind of gone past our normal time zone. But let's listen to the music, and the next piece is a frame drum piece, and there's so much history there that I've just picked up just from being around you and your interest in hand drums, and particularly the frame drum and the history of the frame drum in so many different kinds of cultures around the world. Before we hear this, is there something you could talk a little bit about, since the first time I met you, and you'd already been well established as a musician when I did meet you in the early mid '90s. What's your connection with hand drums and your passion for that, and the different, like, with djembe or or the frame drum, all these, you have a huge history with that runs concurrent to all the other work that you've done, and you bring these other kinds of percussion into your playing in different groups. Is there a reason that that's been so important to you for so long, since the beginning, basically?
I'll try and keep that one short.
Man, just talk. I'm trying to keep my part short.
But I was introduced to the congas. We'll start with the congas. I was introduced to the congas by a good friend of mine, and we're still friends today. And we've been friends since teenagers. And we met in one of the drum shops that used to be in Chicago called Frank's Drum Shop. It was on Wabash. It was like a world-renowned drum shop, and I was in there to buy some sticks. And my friend Adam Rudolph was there, and he asked me if I played. I said, yeah. And I asked him if he played drums. And he said, no, I'm studying congas. He said, in fact, I'm studying with the guy who's at the drum shop, a couple doors down from here. It's called Drums Unlimited. So we used to have these two beautiful drum shops right next to each other in Chicago. And he said he's from New York. His name was Howie Levy, not the Howard Levy who plays harmonica and piano, this different Howie Levy. And he says he teaches every Saturday. Why don't you join the class? I said, okay. So I bought a conga, and the next week I joined the class, and Howie was teaching pretty much from the Afro-Cuban tradition. And he was a stickler for like basics, so the way that he taught you, because basically the conga is made up of three elements. It's the bass, tone, and slap, and so he taught you the most precise way to bring that sound out of the drums. And he gave you a lot of exercises to work with that were based on traditional rhythms, so you can, develop that. And so that was the beginning. That kind of started, that was like the first tasting, and so naturally I started listening to a lot of music that people were playing hand drums, particularly congas, and other type of hand drums, and I started finding out about djembe and stuff like that. This is the short version of the story. And, so then and what was very interesting for me was because with the hand drums, there's nothing that separates your hands, from the instrument. It's like skin on skin. As Mongo Santamaria, the great conga player, who was actually the composer of Afro Blue, he used to say all the time. He said, with the conga, it's skin on skin. With the drum set, you have another apparatus in your hand. You have a stick. So it's the stick that's actually striking the drums and striking the skin. You hold it in your hand. But I started to feel a different sort of sensation, playing the congas, because my hands were like actually touching, the drums, And I think that's why I was so amazed when, in fact, you were the first person to send me this video of Papa Joe, the solo that he was doing, and then in the middle of the solo, he starts playing with his hands and his fingers and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen a trap drummer do that before, So I think he was feeding into that energy too. So that was the beginning, and from that, my interest just started I just started to get more and more interest in just hand drumming in general, and I was learning that hand drumming is like this great tradition, throughout the whole world. And so the next natural step was for me to start purchasing, recordings of different types of hand drums, from different countries. And Chicago at that time had a great record store called Rose's Records, which was right next to Frank's Drum Shop, and they sold music from all over the world, And so after the lesson with Howie on Saturdays, Adam and I, we would always go into Rose's Records and look through the different international sections. And so I was able to purchase a lot of stuff from Africa, from the Middle East, from Morocco, and all these different places from Eastern Europe, and so Caribbean. And And so that started to feed my appetite even more, just listening. And then I felt as though I started to feel that maybe I need to, other than the conga, maybe I need to try and find some teachers, in these other hand drums, and because the interest was growing more and more and more and more. And for the frame drum, my first teacher is a great oud player. Also, his name was Hamza Eldin, and I met him at a festival in New York. But I think the modern day drum set, the drum set is just, it's like a bunch of frame drums that are joined together, like the bass drum is a big frame drum, with whether with two heads on, or if you take the outer head off, it's like a big boron or a big frame drum. The mounted tom is the same, the floor tom is the same. They're just frame drums that are set up, differently, and that happen to be played with sticks. There are other cultures in the world that do their frame drumming with sticks, particularly in the Celtic music, the Irish and Scottish music. The musicians who play the boron play with the stick, amazing techniques. A lot of the indigenous people, whether they're from Greenland or from Alaska or from Canada or from the United States, the indigenous tribes, they play frame drum also, but usually with a stick. So and so I was just starting to tie all of these different, traditions, together, and different things just kept popping out at me. New revelations, started to come, and I discovered that I just discovered that there's a whole world of percussion, that and drumming, drumming and percussion, that I started to become aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So my appetite just kept increasing. And with each of those instruments, I was trying to study the tradition, but at the same time, maybe find my own voice too. I even studied tablas for a little while, but I always knew I could never be a tabla player like Zakir Hussain or Ala Rakan, somebody like that. But I can learn, the theory of the music and maybe get a little bit of a sensation of what it's like to play tabla, get the feel of it, and I can learn more about rhythm also from particularly North Indian, system of rhythm from studying tabla, and getting like the feel of the instrument. And so I just started to develop a great appreciation for the family of drums and percussion, and it's huge.
Yeah.
The percussion drum world is huge, and yeah.
Okay. Well, let's listen to this frame drum piece, and we'll let the drum speak. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We're talking and listening to Hamid Drake, and thanks for tuning in. We got some more music coming your way right now. Thanks so much, Hamid, for all the music and all the conversations tonight. It's been a really great program. It was great to hang out with you on Friday.
Thank you.
And the time flies all the time when I'm with you, and tonight was no exception. So the consensus is we need to do a follow-up show.
Not going to do the piece with you and I playing together? No time?
We'll do that as a send-off.
Okay.
We got one more piece. I cajoled Hamid to let me play with him a little bit. We're going to conclude the show with that, and hoping that maybe in December we can do our annual DKV concerts. That would be beautiful. Things seem to be moving forward, and I just want to wish you luck. I know there was this one week window of opportunity where you were back in town, and you're going to head out again on Wednesday to do some more music on the road. So please be safe out there.
Thank you, brother.
And, it's always a joy to be around you and hear you and spend some time, even in a remote way. So I was very appreciative and
the feeling is mutual, Ken. Thank you so much, brother. Yeah. We have a long, beautiful history together that I appreciate so much, man.
Yeah, I feel the same, and I feel we got a few more things to do in the future.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, everyone. It's been Hamid Drake. We got to get him back here. There's so much more to talk about and to listen to. And we're going to conclude with the first chance I've had to play with Hamid in a year and a half. And so thanks for that gift as well, Mr. Drake. We'll see each other soon. And this is a send-off. Thank you. See you soon. Okay, peace.